without further ado, I'd like to give a big hand to Laszlo.
Hey guys. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's working? Okay. So, as you heard, I was born in the US. I moved to Hungary in 1992 from London. I moved here for 1 year, and I loved it so much I stayed. Actually, it had something to do with my wife and my family. But anyway, so one of those captured souls but as you can see from my name, I've also got some Hungarian background, but I also have a lot of other blood from this part of the world. So my mother-in-law hates me because I keep saying it should be the United States of Europe. But anyway, that's politics. Let's not get there. So because I've been here for 20 years or more, I've seen a lot of things. I also grew up, had a career in the U.S., had my own business in the U.S. a little bit, and I've seen things happen there and here. So I've been asked to talk about the difference in the ecosystem, but I'm going to try and do it from a different perspective. How do I get my slides going? Yeah, there we are. So I'm going to try and do it from a different perspective and not talk about how many accelerators there are and this and that. But I hope what I say, actually, how many people are from this part of the world? Show of hands. Oh, great. Okay. So I hope what I say will help you guys, because you need to understand how people perceive you. You need to understand how investors perceive you. You need to understand how your customers perceive you and your fellow entrepreneurs. So let me start with something basic here. What's the difference between an idea and an entrepreneur? Execution. You got it. It's execution, implementation. And I see a lot of ideas here. This is a really creative place, this part of the world. Europe too, but also US. But unless you implement the idea, you're not going to succeed. That's not to say that R&D is bad. It's great. It supports companies, it supports industry, it supports a whole bunch of things. It supports startups. But unless you implement, it ain't going anywhere. And I think a lot of people here miss this part. So I got some boring stuff for you. There was a survey by the British Venture Capital Association comparing US and Europe proper, and these are some of the findings. No surprise, there's more investments in the US, higher IRRs, more entrepreneurs. No, but there's some interesting things. No real difference in likelihood of an IPO. And this survey was done based on 2012 data, and the world is changing. I mean, Germany used to be ranked the worst in Europe, now it's getting up there. But generally that survey talks about Europe versus US. Europe is still coming up, it's getting there. US is more mature. CEE, I would say we're still in our infancy stage. That's not a criticism, it's just a fact. Now, why is this? What I want to talk about is, again, the perceptions that people have, the causes of it, as opposed to just differences in accelerators. Another tidbit from this survey, they identified that Europe versus US, US has more serial entrepreneurs, much more, and that's important. It's coming in Europe, but it's not there yet. Also, the investor base is different. In the US, you typically have very specific industry investors, specialists. Here, it's kind of generalists. In fact, we're a bit of a generalist. It's developing. And European investments have only 15% serial entrepreneurs. US have 35. Anyway, a lot of boring stuff, but good to set the basics. Now, I think, going back to that slide, innovation versus entrepreneurship, Europe really is focused on innovation, but not implementation. Why? European entrepreneurs, there are less of them. And I've seen, except for the new generation now, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs over the last 20 years come out of big companies, kind of spin off, or go to a big company for a while and kind of hang out there and learn a different way of life and then spin off. Another thing, important thing here, I don't have a pointer here, I don't think. Anyway, fear of failure. In Europe, Actually, I'm not a lawyer, but I know that if you have a bankruptcy, you're criticized. And that's a problem. It's a problem in culture, it's a problem in mindset. Fear of failure. It's not good. You guys have to understand, don't be afraid to fail. That's really important. Throw away all that old mindset. You guys are real hustlers. You understand cash so well in this part of the world, much better than the US, much better than Western Europe. You can go with $1 million for so much longer than anybody else. I've seen it happen. It's really good. Don't be afraid to fail. There's also a great focus on getting EU grants. I have nothing against it, but it can distract the hell out of you. If you can avoid it, don't do it. That's my advice. Investors too, the US investors are focused on the individual. Now this is very important for you guys too. The individual, the entrepreneur. Who are they? I mean, I was just in a conference in Osijek, Croatia, 2 days ago? And the woman there from Techstars said, we focus on the entrepreneur more than anything else. Absolutely. In Europe, that's not the case. But if you're going to talk to a US investor, you got to be impressive. Really important. You got to be impressive anyway. But you got to implement too. It's so much more important there than the European mindset, which is more conservative. I want it to get to profitability, rather than I'm willing to fund the loss. It's also a difference in mindset. Which one's better for you depends on what kind of company you got, what kind of market you're targeting. And there's also this concept of lifestyle I wanted to just touch on. My impression, living here for 20 years, is people are more interested in just making it to a certain point and just kind of sitting there, oh, this is good, this is enough, I'll get my cash out of the business. And they're not focused on really going for the moon, really going for a high goal, which a Silicon Valley entrepreneur typically is. Anyway, a couple thoughts I wanted to share there. So this is probably obvious. You got to have the passion. You got to sacrifice. I mean, I myself have almost gone bankrupt. You got to get there. You got to be there. You got to have that drive, like we just heard. You know, no sleep, whatever. It's a sacrifice. Be a risk taker. Don't be afraid to fail. And as you just said, implement. Anyway, the last one is important. I think everybody thinks they're smart. Excuse me. But listen. Don't forget to listen. Communication, the most important thing is that you're listening to someone and you heard them. Actually, I'll share a story. Before I got married, I have 2 sisters. My sister said to me, I'll give you some advice. When you're planning your wedding, talk to your wife-to-be about the plans and listen to her and respond, give your opinion. And don't just say yes, yes, yes. Say, yes, I agree because of this. Because then they know you're listening. Anyway, that's true for investors and your partners, your team, everybody. Okay, what are good investor traits? Just be careful out there. Not everybody's good. I'm not saying we're great, but you got to look for these things. Sector and operational experience, this trend to specialty. It helps you succeed and implement, because then you can avoid the pitfalls, avoid the potholes, and keep going. They should help you succeed with their network. If they just give you cash, it's not enough. They should help you succeed. Network, they help you by introducing you to people. They should leave you alone as long as you're doing a good job. Leave you alone. Actually, I'll touch on it. If you don't do it good, if you don't perform, the investor probably will get involved. And you don't want that. And then it becomes a vicious cycle sometimes. Sometimes it helps. Get investors who have additional capacity to follow you to the moon with more investment. Keep going. And let them have some experience. I see a lot of people out there who just are doing things, I don't know, not really helping out and technically not very sophisticated either. Let's talk about quickly valuation differences. Is there a valuation difference between the US, Europe, and CEE? Definitely. Definitely. The US is buzzing. It's definitely an entrepreneur's market to seek money. Europe is less so, but it's gotten much, much better. And the good teams, there are starting to be serial entrepreneurs here, and the good teams are getting money very quickly. I mean, we're involved in a couple of deals. It's amazing the pace that it's going versus the other deals. But Europe does have a limited supply, and that's supply and demand. So anyway, here's an attempt to show you what the hell I'm talking about and the differences. There is a big difference. A seed round in the US is a Series A over here. It's amazing. We were just on a phone call last week, and a guy from Silicon Valley, we're doing a deal with him, and he goes, yeah, you know, this round is like a seed round for us, but it's considered a Series A over here. And this, actually, this doesn't, it's not, this particular deal is Western Europe and Eastern Europe together. It's kind of a, so the amount of money invested and the valuations both are hugely different. The gap is closing, but now what does this mean? You should all move to the US. No, it doesn't mean that, because the US is not for everybody either. So don't take advice to move to the US under whatever circumstance. And by the way, this I found this basic format on Quora, and it's about 2 years ago, and I can't remember, so I'm sorry whoever the initial credit goes to. Okay, so just some other suggestions for you guys, the entrepreneurs. Focus on the customer. You've heard this before. I'm not going to say it. I even saw some guys talking about it. Maintain that competitive edge. Again, particularly CEE, my perception, other people's perceptions of entrepreneurs here is the competitive edge they try to maintain is in their local market, using their connections in the local market, trying to get government contracts, for example, and EU grants, for example. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's done above board. And there's nothing wrong with a company that targets that, but if you want to go for the moon, you're not going to do it in these small markets. So, and you won't attract a investor on attractive terms if your main customers are government-owned banks, telecom, whatever. It just won't happen. So, and again, this transparent communication, it really avoids misunderstandings. Just tell it like it is. And give enough. You don't have to tell everything, but give enough that people understand what's going on. Particularly if it's going well, you don't have to say a lot because it's going well. If it's not going well, you got to explain why. Okay, here's some success stories. Maybe you know about them. Some of them we've tried to collect from just about every country in the region, and there are some great success stories. I actually published a book with the American Chamber of Commerce on successful entrepreneurs out of Hungary. It's 14 of them, log me in, Presi's in there, and that kind of thing. But there are examples in each country. And if you guys look to these good examples, these are all garage to success. It's great. You can do it. There's no reason why not. I just give you 2 commercials. So iEurope, we have US mostly high net worth investors. Here's some of them, like Gil Pacina, he's #1 on AngelList, Esther Dyson, Tom Lehrman from Gerson Lehrman Associates, Alfred Angeloni, he's a software enterprise guy. These guys all help us pick, grow, and exit our investments, and we also do deals with them generally. And then besides me, there's Christina, a woman that I greatly respect. She's my co-founder of iEurope with me, and Miklos, our new partner, and it's good to have a different perspectives. So anyway, this is what we do. So if you guys got something, let us know, and thank you. Any questions?
All right, who has questions? Any hands? There we go.
You said that, like in the US, there are more risk takers in Europe, and we had a similar experience. And what I'm starting to realize is that most European investors, they are not interested to invest into startups, but more in like small successful companies that already have traction. Is that a fact, or do you have a different opinion on that?
I think there are family offices in Europe that, in other words, investors in Europe that do like this space. The more common one is the ones, what you just said, which is to invest into a business with cash, with revenue, with cash flow, and yeah, it's growing. I mean, there's a couple. I don't want to give the commercials for Somewhere Brothers, but that kind of concept of rapid implementation is really growing. I mean, we're in touch with some entrepreneurs that are able to attract and smart money and balance money depending on what market they're attacking and what sector, etc. So it's growing, it's changing. Keep looking, it's out there. It's out there.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Yes.
Are you interested in transportation?
Transportation.
Yeah.
I transport myself every day.
Electric car for teenagers.
Sorry?
Electric car for teenagers.
Electric car for teenagers. I have 2 teenagers. We should talk.
Discuss.
Sure.
Hi, you mentioned the difference between the valuation and the round sizes.
Yeah.
Do you think it's good or bad, or what can we learn from it? Or can we take advantage of it from CEE?
Yeah, the question was about the difference in valuations, the rounds. What do we learn from it? I think the one thing to learn about it, since there aren't a lot of investors in CEE, thankfully there's a lot of fly-in guys. So if you can show that your target market is big enough, you should be able to get much closer to the US and Western Europe kind of levels. It depends on what your model is, what your target is. Someone, the woman before me even said you have to communicate what you're doing in the right way. Because if you start with, I don't want to pick on you, but reverse crowdfunding, sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you. It's not understandable. You got to be, the elevator pitch. You got to focus on the elevator pitch. You got to explain to people what we do. Our elevator pitch is that we invest in innovative growth companies in CEE with global target, So you got to figure that out. And it's up to you to get that gap closed. And I think it's happening because the supply of investors is coming out. That's happening naturally as the ecosystem develops, as more success stories are talked about. So it's coming. But there are other risks too. Perceptions of risk, like legal framework, even though it's EU and all this stuff, it's a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
Do you see some difference in nature of startups? What do they target? Maybe CEE startups, they are more target regional markets or some special topics.
So the question was, do we see a
difference in nature of these startups, Europe versus US?
Well, I think core competency here is software. It's really easy. It's you set it up, you get going. So a lot of engineers here. I mean, hardware, software. Actually, we've seen a lot of hardware, software combinations. Healthcare. That's the main focus here. But you're talking about the nature of it, the underlying nature of it. I guess the entrepreneur sits down, tries to come up with something. I see very few teams who systematically go and think about what they want to do. They rather end up going into something they know and try to make it a success here, as opposed to sitting down, figuring out what they want to do and go after it. We recently, there was a successful sale of AutoHop to BlaBlaCar. We're an owner of AutoHop. That's a ride-sharing, long-distance ride-sharing company. And those entrepreneurs sat down, came up with a laundry list of things they were looking at, threw this one out, threw that one out, decided to go for this one because they thought it would be the best, and they did it. The typical entrepreneur here, you know, he was in college with a friend and they came up with this idea because they were in this class together and they wanted to develop it further. Again, the mentality of the European, particularly the CEE engineer, is to develop something further and make it better. Peter Thiel, you know, is always saying, don't make something better, create something totally different. That's disruptive. So the CEE entrepreneur is refining something. That's the nature of it.
Yes, last question.
Hello.
Hello.
Right now you said something about, you know, Peter Thiel saying that you should make something different, not just better. My question is somehow related to this. You see a lot of, you know, successful enterprises and stuff in the United States, and their market is the United States. They're not really working globally. So if you want to go after something, and I'm not talking about copying the idea or the concept, it's something with the same implementation somehow in Europe, and if you go after the European market.
Sure.
That's okay. That we also invest in copycats. Like AutoHop is a copycat of BlaBlaCar, or we had an investment in eBay. I mean, that can work, and our experience in that is okay. The markets are smaller, so your upside is smaller, but you can still make a success out of it. So you got to at least do regionally. Don't just do one country because it's too small. It's not worth it. And the other thing is you can implement, if you implement it well, you can still protect yourself. Like in Poland, eBay tried to come in and kill the local leader, and it couldn't because the local team had the local market knowledge. So if you implement it well, you can create that barrier and succeed and be the winner.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good guys, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.